It was a year ago, and I was 19, living in a small town with not much to do. I was bored one night, scrolling through the web, looking for any distraction to pass the time. That's when I remembered Omegle, a site I hadn't visited in years. As a teenager, I used to spend hours on it, talking with strangers from all over the world. Sure, there were plenty of creeps, but there were also genuine, interesting people. I decided to give it another shot, not expecting much. I typed alternative into the interest tag, hoping to filter out some of the weirdos and connect with people closer to my age. After a few minutes of skipping dull or inappropriate chats, I matched with someone who called himself Cashin. Cashin was 23, a few years older than me, and lived about 3 hours away in another town. We talked all night, literally until 6 a.m., and I couldn't believe how easy it was to open up to him. At some point during the conversation, we started talking about where we lived. Cashin mentioned a beautiful mountain near his home called Oran Ridge, a place he loved to hike and camp. Then, out of nowhere, he said, "We should meet up sometime. I could take you camping there. It's amazing." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but he wasn't. "Seriously," he insisted. "It's not that far, and it would be fun." Part of me was hesitant. I'd never met anyone from Omegle in person before. It felt risky. But another part of me was intrigued. Cashin seemed normal, friendly, and genuinely interesting. I couldn't detect any red flags, and after hours of talking, I felt like I knew him. So against my better judgment, I said yes. We planned the trip for the following weekend, since he had those days off work. I asked for his number so we could coordinate more easily, and he gave it to me. When I texted him, the messages showed up green, indicating he had an Android. I teased him about it, joking that iPhones were far superior. His response was strange. "Oh, I have 2 phones," he said. "One for work and one for personal use." That set off a tiny alarm bell in my head. Why would a 23-year-old need 2 phones? It seemed odd, but I brushed it off. Maybe it was a work requirement or just a personal quirk. As the day of the trip approached, I started feeling a bit anxious. I Googled Oran Ridge to learn more about it, and I came across some concerning information. Apparently, the area was known for having contaminated soil due to old mining operations. There were warnings about arsenic exposure and advice to wash your clothes and shoes thoroughly after hiking there. I texted Cashin about it, asking why he'd chosen a place that could be potentially dangerous. He replied quickly, assuring me that it was safe. "I've camped there dozens of times," he said. "It's fine as long as you're careful. Besides, it's a really beautiful spot. You'll love it." That reassured me a little, but I still felt a nagging unease. My parents weren't thrilled about the idea of me meeting someone from Omegle, let alone going camping with him. I didn't tell them the full truth, of course. I said he was a friend I'd met through a video game and that we'd been talking for a month. Even then, they were skeptical. "You don't know this person," my mom said. "It's dangerous." But eventually, after much convincing, they reluctantly let me go. Cashin arrived at my house on the morning of the trip. He didn't come inside, opting to wait by his car instead. My mom came out to meet him briefly, asking a few questions about where we were going. He answered politely, smiling the whole time, which seemed to put her at ease. We stopped at a Starbucks near my house before starting the drive. He got a coffee, and we sat in his car for over an hour, listening to music. He had a notebook filled with the names of songs he liked, which he showed me proudly. It was a little quirky but kind of endearing. After a while, I suggested we get going so we could set up camp before dark. But Cashin kept saying, "Just 5 more minutes." It was frustrating, but I didn't push too hard. Finally, after half an hour of stalling, we started driving. The ride was long, over 3 hours, and Cashin spent most of it talking about himself. He shared stories about his friends, his ex-girlfriends, and his opinions on various topics. At one point, he mentioned that he only wore sustainable clothing and thought anyone who ate junk food was stupid. I tried to steer the conversation toward lighter topics, asking him about his hobbies. He mentioned that he liked to go on Omegle and tell people he was a Russian soldier who tortured people. I laughed nervously, assuming it was a weird joke, but he didn't laugh. He just smiled and said, "What? It's funny." It wasn't funny. It was unsettling. When we finally reached Oran Ridge, it was already late afternoon. The parking lot near the trailhead was small, with only a few spots. A couple of older men were hanging around their cars, smoking weed. Cashin parked and turned to me. "It's too cold to set up camp," he said. "What do you mean?" I asked. We didn't come all this way for nothing. He insisted that the temperature was too low and that it would take too long to pitch the tent. He told me to get out of the car and feel how cold it was. I rolled down the window and stuck my hand out. The air was freezing, and the wind made it worse. Reluctantly, I agreed to sleep in the car for the night. I was disappointed, but I didn't want to argue. As night fell, the atmosphere in the car grew tense. Cashin became quieter, his mood shifting in a way I couldn't quite put my finger on. I tried to distract myself by scrolling through my phone, but he grabbed it from me and said, "Come here." Before I could react, he pulled me into the back seat. What happened next was something I'll never forget. Cashin assaulted me. I don't remember much of it. I think my mind blocked out the details to protect me. I just remember feeling frozen, unable to move or speak. When it was over, he smiled at me and said, "So, how was it?" I didn't respond. I couldn't. He climbed into the front seat and went to sleep like nothing had happened. I stayed in the back, curled up in a fetal position, staring out the window. The next morning, he acted as if everything was normal. He suggested we get breakfast at a nearby cafe, and I went along with it, too scared to protest. While we ate, I tried to think of a way to get home safely. I told him my mom wanted me back early, hoping that would convince him to leave. He seemed annoyed but eventually agreed. The drive back was silent, the air heavy with unspoken tension. When we reached my house, I grabbed my things and ran inside without looking back. That night, I blocked his number and deleted every trace of him from my phone. I didn't tell my parents what had happened. I couldn't bear to see their heartbreak. For months, I carried the weight of that night, blaming myself for trusting him. But over time, I realized the fault wasn't mine. It was his. Online dating was never something I thought I'd try, but one slow evening, curiosity got the better of me. I created a profile on a dating app, filled it with a mix of carefully chosen photos and answers to random icebreaker questions, and then I started swiping. It felt oddly exhilarating, like flipping through a catalog of possibilities. After a few days of scrolling and small talk with several matches, I started chatting with Cormac. We messaged and hit that spark immediately. Our conversations were easy and lighthearted, filled with jokes about bad movies and shared love for a particular sci-fi author. I found myself looking forward to his replies. So when he asked if I'd like to meet up for coffee, I said yes. We decided on a small cafe downtown, cozy and bustling, but not overwhelming. I deliberately chose a public place because, well, it was online dating. You can't be too careful. I arrived a few minutes early, the mix of excitement and nerves tightening my stomach as I sipped on a glass of water and waited. When Cormac walked in, I recognized him immediately from his pictures. He was average height, neatly dressed in a button-down shirt and dark jeans, with a warm smile that put me at ease. "Hi Arlena, right?" he said, extending his hand. "That's me," I replied, shaking his hand and gesturing toward the chair across from me. The first half of the date went smoothly. We made small talk about work, hobbies, and our favorite places in the city. He seemed interested in my job as a graphic designer, asking thoughtful questions and sharing stories about his own work challenges. The conversation flowed easily, and I started to relax, thinking maybe this could turn into something good. But then about halfway through the date, something shifted. Cormac leaned forward, his tone becoming more serious. "You know," he began, "I've been thinking a lot about my future lately." "Yeah," I said, curious. "Yeah," he continued, his eyes lighting up with a strange intensity. "I've got everything planned out. I know exactly where I want to be in 5, 10, even 20 years. I smiled politely, unsure of where this was going. "That's great. It's good to have goals." "Oh, it's more than goals," he said, pulling out his phone. He opened a note-taking app and started scrolling through what looked like a never-ending list. "I've mapped out every step. By 32, I want to buy a house. By 35, I want to have 2 kids. By 40, I should be settled in my dream job, probably as a creative director. And somewhere in there, I want to travel to at least 30 countries." He kept going, outlining his life plan in meticulous detail. It wasn't just the big milestones. He had specific ages for when he wanted to take up new hobbies, start investing in real estate, and even retire. At first, I found it impressive, like he was someone who really had his life together. But the more he talked, the more unsettling it became. It wasn't just the detail, it was the way he spoke about it, like it was a script he had written for his life, with no room for deviation. He wasn't sharing dreams or aspirations, he was laying out expectations. And then he started slotting me into the plan. "You know," he said, looking at me intently, "I can see you fitting into all of this." I blinked, caught off guard. "What do you mean?" "Well," he said, smiling, "you're creative, driven, and you love hiking. You'd be a great fit for the kind of life I want to build. I can tell you'd make an amazing mom, too." I froze, unsure how to respond. We had just met. This was our first date. How could he already be talking about me fitting into his life plan? I tried to steer the conversation back to safer ground. "So, what's your favorite place you've traveled to?" I asked, forcing a smile. But Cormac didn't take the hint. Instead, he launched into a detailed analysis of his past relationships, explaining why each one had failed and how those experiences had shaped his expectations for a partner. It wasn't just the content of what he was saying, it was the detached, almost clinical way he said it, like he was analyzing failed business ventures rather than past loves. By this point, my unease had turned into full-blown discomfort. It felt like I wasn't a person to him, just a potential candidate for the role of wife and mother in his carefully curated life plan. I glanced around the cafe, searching for a distraction. The chatter of other patrons and the clinking of coffee cups faded into the background as Cormac continued talking, oblivious to my growing discomfort. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I needed to get out of there. "I'm so sorry," I said, cutting him off mid-sentence. "I just remembered I have to check on something in my car." He looked surprised but nodded. "Sure, no problem. I'll wait here." I gathered my things, trying to keep my movements calm and casual, but as soon as I was outside, I let out a deep breath. The cool evening air hit my face, and I felt a wave of relief. I walked to my car, sat in the driver's seat, and just sat there for a moment, trying to process what had just happened. Cormac hadn't done anything overtly wrong, but the intensity of his expectations and the way he spoke about his life plans had been overwhelming. I realized then that I didn't want to be slotted into someone else's script. I wanted a partner who saw me as an equal, not a supporting character in their pre-written story. When I got home, I replayed the date in my head, wondering if I had overreacted. But deep down, I knew my instincts had been right. Something about the way Cormac spoke and acted had felt off, and I had to trust that feeling. The next morning, I received a text from him. "Hey Arlena, I had a great time last night. Let me know when you'd like to meet up again." I stared at the message for a long moment before typing out a polite but firm reply. "Hi Cormac, thanks for the coffee, but I don't think we're a good match. I wish you all the best." I grew up in a small, quiet town in Alabama. Life there was slow-paced, predictable, and safe, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else and gossip traveled faster than the church bells ringing on Sunday morning. I graduated high school at 18, full of youthful optimism, but uncertain about my future. That summer, I met a man who would change my life in ways I could never have anticipated. His name was Alaric, and he was from a nearby city. I was instantly smitten when I met him. He wasn't like the guys from my town, the ones I'd grown up with, who wore the same muddy boots and baseball caps every day. Alaric was different. Everything about him seemed sophisticated and mysterious. We met at a small diner during one of my trips to the city with friends. He approached our table, introduced himself, and asked me if I wanted to go out for coffee sometime. I agreed without hesitation. Our first date was unforgettable. We sat in a dimly lit cafe, sipping on lattes and talking for hours. Alaric revealed something unexpected that night. He used to be part of a gang. I remember feeling a jolt of surprise when he said it so casually, but he quickly explained that it was a thing of the past. "I grew up in a rough neighborhood," he told me, his voice low and serious. "When you're surrounded by that kind of environment, you don't have many options." He assured me that he had left that life behind. He even showed me the tattoos that proved his affiliations, intricate designs inked into his skin. I Googled them later that night, and sure enough, they matched the symbols of a well-known gang. Everything he said lined up. Alaric didn't give me any bad vibes, though. Despite his past, he was a perfect gentleman. He opened doors for me, listened intently when I spoke, and treated me with kindness and respect. I was young and naive, but I believed him when he said he had turned his life around. We started dating, and for a few weeks, everything seemed perfect. I felt like I was in a dream, swept off my feet by this enigmatic man who made me feel special in a way I never had before. The night I stayed over at Alaric's apartment was when everything changed. It was the first time I had ever spent the night at his place. I was cautious by nature, and I had a self-imposed 3-date rule about staying over. But Alaric had been so sweet and patient, and I felt like I could trust him. His apartment was modest, clean, and decorated with a surprising sense of style. I remember thinking that it didn't look like the kind of place a former gang member would live in. That evening, Alaric's best friend, Ezekiel, stopped by. Ezekiel was tall and lanky, with a nervous energy that put me on edge. Alaric introduced him as an old friend, but it quickly became clear that there was more to their relationship. While Alaric stepped out to take a phone call, Ezekiel pulled me aside. "You know, we used to be on opposite sides," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I stared at him, confused. "What do you mean?" I asked. "I was in a rival gang," he admitted. "But Alaric and I go way back. We've got an understanding." He laughed nervously, as if that explained everything. I didn't know what to say. Why was he telling me this? Why hadn't Alaric mentioned it? My mind raced with questions, but before I could ask any of them, Alaric returned, and the conversation shifted to something mundane. Later that night, after Ezekiel left, I noticed something strange. Alaric's bedroom closet was slightly ajar, and inside, I caught a glimpse of what can only be described as an arsenal. There were guns, multiple guns, stacked neatly on shelves, along with ammunition, a bulletproof vest, and even what looked like grenades. My stomach dropped. This wasn't normal. I tried to rationalize it, telling myself that maybe he was just overly cautious because of his past. But deep down, I knew there was more to it. As we lay in bed, I couldn't shake the image of that closet. I must have been quieter than usual, because Alaric asked me if something was wrong. I hesitated, then decided to be honest. "Why do you have so many weapons?" I asked. He didn't even flinch. Instead, he gave me a long, unreadable look before finally speaking. "I still take jobs sometimes," he said matter-of-factly. "Jobs?" I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. He nodded. "I'm still with the gang," he admitted. "I don't do much anymore, but if they need me, well, I handle things." "Handle things?" The words felt foreign in my mouth. "I'm a hitman," he said, his tone as casual as if he were discussing the weather. "Only when it's necessary." I stared at him, my mind struggling to process what I had just heard. He didn't look away, didn't try to sugarcoat it or explain himself further. His eyes were cold, devoid of any emotion. I felt a chill run down my spine. This man, the one who had been so kind and attentive, was admitting to killing people. I realized then that I didn't truly know him at all. I didn't leave that night. I was too scared to make a sudden move, afraid of what he might do if he sensed my fear. Instead, I stayed awake, my body tense and my mind racing. By morning, I had made up my mind. I couldn't be with someone like Alaric. No amount of charm or good looks could make up for what he had just revealed. When he dropped me off at my place the next day, I told him I needed some time to think. He didn't seem surprised, almost as if he expected it. I never called him again. He didn't try to contact me either, which was a relief. Looking back, I think he respected my decision, or maybe he just didn't care. I never told anyone about Alaric, not even my closest friends. It's a chapter of my life that I prefer to keep closed. But I learned something valuable from that experience. People aren't always who they appear to be. No matter how charming or kind someone seems, you should always trust your instincts, especially when something doesn't feel right.